Hi, everybody. It's Elektra Yao, immigration attorney and entertainment attorney located here in New York. We have offices here in New York City and in New Jersey. Thank you, everybody, for watching the video. I'm very excited to talk to you today about testimonial letters. But before we do, if you are not following me on social media, make sure to follow me on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Clubhouse, YouTube to get my latest updates and information and tips on immigration and O-1 visas. So today we're going to talk about testimonial letters, but yesterday, as I was signing off, someone left a really, really great question. Someone asked, can I go from an O2 visa, which is essential support personnel, for an O1? Can I go from an O2 visa to a green card? And the answer is yes. You can absolutely do so, and I have done it successfully. The only issue is sometimes that you have to work very, very hard on the presentation of the case and the presentation of the merits of the client that you're working on. So it is something that can be done. It's just a little bit more complex, especially because the client doesn't have extraordinary ability status via an O1. The client is just support personnel. So like I said, I've done it several times successfully. It is not easy, but it can definitely be done successfully with an approval, and you can definitely have your green card in hand. I strongly suggest that if you are thinking about this route, that you speak with an experienced immigration attorney who can guide you properly. Now, back to testimonial letters. Testimonial letters are used in both O-1A cases and O-1B cases, but we'll talk about them in O-1B cases because there are specific evidentiary criteria within the O-1B regulations. So for O-1Bs, you need to submit some sort of significant recognition from experts in the field. Now, the law says it can be from an organization, a private organization, a government organization, or experts in the field. So to satisfy that criterion, what's commonly used is awards, if you've won awards, or from expert testimony letters from experts in your field. Now, let's just go over a couple of things that people always ask. Is there a minimum or maximum amount of letters that you need for the letters? And the answer is no. You can submit with as little as 2, or you can submit with as much as 14. And I've done both. I like to stick to a well-rounded number because just in case of RFE, you want to, of course, add in more letters. But there's absolutely no minimum or maximum. Another question that I'm always asked is, do these signers need to be American or based in America? And the answer is no. They can also be international experts, or they can be Americans who are based abroad, or they can be people who have just never been to America. The important thing is that they are experts within the field, especially the field that you're applying for, your field of endeavor. So those are the top questions that I get asked. I sometimes get asked, can I use a professor? I don't like to use professors unless the professor has some sort of professional career outside of the university. And in that case, then the person would be an expert in the field. But although experts usually teach at an academic level, it is not considered to be professional. So I tend to stay away from professors unless a professor has a career outside of the university. But again, like I said, there's no limit. You could definitely use a professor. It's just my strategic preference based on my experience. But definitely I've seen other attorneys use letters of recommendation from professors with university letterhead. Another question that I get asked is who writes the letters? This is a really great question, and this really depends on the attorney that you're working with. Letters of recommendation, I take them very, very seriously because I use them in a multitude of ways in my petitions. Certain attorneys will have the client write it, and that's perfectly fine. Sometimes you need that additional insight directly from the client. We do it reverse. So what we do is we actually research the field in its entirety, and we research and try to understand the achievements of our client and position our client within the field with her achievements. We then ask the client to complete certain parts that we were unable to properly analyze based on lack of information, because a CV can only communicate so much information. So we draft the letters on our own. We send them to the client for review, and the client reviews it for factual accuracy to make sure that everything is correct, and then that letter is then sent to the signer. So again, there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to testimonials. They can definitely be drafted by the client if the client insists. They can definitely be drafted by the attorney, which is I think the more sensible and strategic approach. But everyone is different and everyone feels differently about these things. I definitely encourage clients' participation in these letters, because we need client insight to really understand the impact of the client's contribution to a specific project, if that makes sense. So those are like the top questions I get asked about testimonial letters. Now, what is the format of a testimonial letter? Like, what makes a good testimonial letter? So a good testimonial letter will include specific identifiable details about your contribution or your leadership to a project, on a project. So let's say, for example, like you served as a designer for Marquesa, for example, and you were involved in selecting the color palette or the color scheme for the dress. A properly drafted letter really should focus on your process of selecting the color. Like, why did you select the specific color? Should also focus on how did your color really impact the success or the sale of that dress. So these are very, very important details that have to be and should be recognized by the expert that is signing the letter. So the more detail, the better. And I think a lot of the times we think, or clients think, that they have an understanding of testimonial letters, but testimonial letters in the real world, so in the non-O1 world, just tend to not be so specific about a person and tend to focus on qualities of a person, like positive traits of a person, as opposed to focusing on specific achievements and accomplishments and contributions, which is what the letter needs to contain to satisfy the criterion. So as I always say, no one really cares if you're nice. No one really cares, if you showed up on time. What the officer is really looking for within those letters is your specific contribution, like the expertise that you have demonstrated working on a specific project or specific company, a specific production, etc. So these are difficult to do if you don't have a strong understanding of the field. That's why it's very important when you're selecting your attorney to really spend time understanding whether or not your attorney even understands the field that you're working in. Because if he or she doesn't, then drafting those letters is going to be a little bit complex. Obviously, there's a lot of research that's undergone. There's a lot of analysis that undergoes your CV and your professional achievements to really highlight the important contributions that you've made to a project. So those are testimonial letters. We take them very seriously because, like I said, I use them in a multitude of ways in the petition. I don't only use them to satisfy the criteria on significant recognition, but I also sometimes use them as confirmation letters. I also sometimes use them as documentary support. So let's say you don't have a lot of evidence for a production that you participated in or that you performed in, I will use that letter as evidence. So it can go into multiple categories. It doesn't necessarily need to only go in the significant recognition category. So that is how we use them. I discussed the top 3 or 4 questions that I usually get with testimonial letters for O-1 visas. But what's critical to remember, if you remember anything from this discussion, is just remember that there needs to be a very high level of specificity and a very high level of detail and analysis in the work that you've done that's being presented within the letter. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to discuss them live, to share this information, so that there's no confusion as to the O1 process. I think probably towards next week, we're going to talk about another topic that is also equally important, and that's the transition from O1 to EB1A, which is something that is on the minds of everyone that is an O1 visa holder. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see everyone tomorrow morning or tomorrow at 1 p.m. to continue to discuss visa information, O1 information, artist visa information to empower you to make the best decision for yourselves. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.